I've been trying to get involved with more of the local politics of where I live. The primaries for the new mayoral race are in August, with the final election being in November if nobody's chosen at that time. And I wanted to meet one of the candidates, Drew Buchanan. I reached out to him and asked if he wouldn't mind being in an interview with me. And much to my surprise, he agreed. So I hope you enjoy. Here's my interview with Drew.
First off, thank you, Drew, so much for agreeing to be interviewed with me. I pretty much just want to ask you, who are you? Why are you running for mayor?
Sure. No, thanks, Holden, for letting me come out and talk with you a little bit. So really what it boils down to is, I've been in Pensacola for about 5 years. My family's from here. They moved here in the 1870s as Irish immigrants. At that time, they were kind of second-class citizens. So I actually grew up in Fort Walton Beach. After World War II, my family moved to Eglin Air Force Base because that's where a lot of development was happening. So I grew up there, so I have a little bit of a different perspective in that I'm not a actually native Pensacolian, even though I kind of consider myself one because my family's been here so long. But more than that, when I moved here, I had joined the Air Force at 17. I'd been in the Air Force about 4 or 5 years, and I came back here because I wanted to move home. And I recognized my family's history in Pensacola, and I came over here. I always used to come over here as a kid, and I always used to think it was this big city because all I knew was Fort Walton, right? And now I understand that we're a pretty small city, but we really have everything that I think you want in a small city, small town. There's a lot to do in the city of this size. We have tons of different cultures. I really think we're like a melting pot of diversity here. You get to meet so many people. There's so many businesses. We have a really good startup culture, especially downtown in Pensacola. So for me, I had started The Pulse, which was a local news outlet.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that.
And I have a deep affinity for digging through and investigating local issues, and eventually decided, hey, why don't I decide just to do it myself, to start, a quote-unquote newspaper.
Yeah.
So one day I just started a website, and that became The Pulse, and we've been doing that for about 3 years, and we can go into it more later, but I eventually decided to sell it when I decided to run for mayor.
Why did you sell The Pulse?
So it was important to me. I had been doing this for 3 years with The Pulse. It was my baby, so to speak.
Yeah.
I was a publisher, and I was in it every single day. It was basically a nonprofit. I really didn't make any money from it. It's what I love doing. Thankfully I had another business, the Pensacola Pedal Trolley, which I still own, that allowed me to get out and focus on the issues that matter with The Pulse. But it was important to me that when I decided to run for mayor, that there was a clear line of not being a conflict of interest. I have no day-to-day contacts with the new owners who are really passionate. There are a couple former P&J reporters from the Pensacola News Journal, and they've decided after they left the News Journal to take over this independent publication, which I think is fantastic, and I'm happy to hand it over, and I hope it succeeds.
Yeah. You talked before about not accepting any big donors or anything. Why is that?
Yeah, so almost every day when I wake up, I'm like, what did I do? But I think if there's any overarching issue in politics today, we need a different mindset when it comes to running for office, and especially for local office. It needs to be regular people that aren't focused on doing it for a career. And my uncle, who was actually the governor of Florida and ran for president a long time ago, back in the 80s, he believed in that, and he wanted to not allow PACs, political action committees, and corporations or special interests to have a unlimited spending spree when it comes to donating to local political campaigns. So what I'm doing is doing it really grassroots style. Out of any candidate running, there's 4 of us running for mayor. I have the most small donations, under $50, and I'm really prideful of that. And we're only going to try to increase that and focus on getting these small donations from individual people, not corporations or big donors.
You've talked about, this is one of the first things that I remember of you kind of posting, at least on social media, was talking about the decriminalization of marijuana. And that kind of, that's obviously a controversial issue.
Sure.
So what's going on with that?
Yeah, I think I threw everyone for a loop when it came to putting that out in the sphere. My intention was I've been in the race for about 7-8 weeks now, and there's now 4 of us, like I've said, but no one was raising any issues at all of substance within the mayor's race or within the city of Pensacola. So for me, I kind of reflected back and said, well, hey, what's an important issue, especially to people that it affects, dealing with cannabis and low-level offenses, but what's also going to get people talking about the mayor's race? So I agree that it had a dual-faceted impact and it got everyone talking. It was in the newspapers. I got interviewed by Channel 3 and all these local media outlets, and that's great. And I'm also getting to talk to you, people like you. But for me, it's an outdated, archaic law. It wastes the resources of police officers. Before I announced, I had talked to police officers. We had talked to folks in the public safety fields, and we said, hey, if there's anything we could do, such as getting rid of or not enforcing low-level cannabis crimes to free up resources for you to focus on real crimes, would that be okay with you? And it was a resounding yes. They need the resources because they're already not paid enough when it comes to police officers. Yeah. We need to raise their pay, and we need to do it beyond the rate of inflation. That's a big deal. So for me, it was a win-win-win for the community. I actually don't think it's very controversial. I personally believe cannabis use should be recreational. It's a plant. I have a kind of a libertarian view when it comes to this. If you're not harming anyone else, you can do what you want within reason.
Yeah.
But that's not my authority to interject. But what I can do is direct city staff to enforce certain laws. I'll use one example, as I think I spoke with you earlier about alcohol in open containers in public in downtown Pensacola. It's actually not a law that's enforced. Why can't we do the same thing with low-level cannabis, which is actually a less harmful substance, right? That's a whole other conversation, but that's kind of where I came from that.
Talking about the other people that are running, Mayo stated, I'm quoting him here, he said it's really a non-issue. Some of the officers that he's spoken to says it's on very rare occasion that anyone is taken to jail for the offense. So it's really not an issue that needs our focus. Do you have any response to that?
Yeah, absolutely. David's actually exactly right. A lot of people aren't arrested just for low-level cannabis crimes. What they are arrested for at an alarming rate is for low-level cannabis crimes tacked on to additional charges. I would say David's wrong that it's not an issue. For the people that it affects, which is across the spectrum, it matters.
Aside from that, are there any other issues that can really distinguish you from some of the other candidates that are running?
No, I mean, there's a lot of issues that we agree on. Some common ones that I'm passionate about are, streamlining the city budget. We have, this is probably alarming to most people, but we have about $250 million budget for the city of Pensacola. There are about close to 60,000 people here. We'll see what we find out in the next census, but I think we're growing strongly. But as a comparison, the city of Fort Walton Beach, actually where I grew up, they have a budget of about $20 million. So that's a wild, disparity. The reason for that is the city of Pensacola controls so many other funds, including the airport, the port of Pensacola, Pensacola Energy, which provides natural gas services to the metro as a whole outside the city, the sanitation department, and others. So we have a huge budget, and the problem is no one really understands it except a few people. So my goal is to really dig down into the budget, find what we're wasting, find what can be increased, find what can be streamlined, and it comes down to a lot of things. We're wasting millions of dollars every year on lawsuits, litigation, frivolous litigation.
Yeah, that's actually one of the things I wanted to talk about too. Even on your website, you said unnecessary lawsuits have pushed the city's legal costs out of control, wasting millions of taxpayer dollars. You said I'll reduce unnecessary legal expenses and litigation.
Right.
How would you do that? Or give me some examples of
Absolutely.
That you would do.
Well, to be specific, last year the city of Pensacola tried to unconstitutionally, criminalize panhandling, and more than that,
yeah, I remember that.
Criminalize, holding a sign that said, we'll do something for food or money or whatever. That shouldn't be illegal. It's a First Amendment right. So thankfully, the ACLU sued them. They won. I don't think they won. They dropped the lawsuit. So the city of Pensacola dropped the lawsuit because they realized it was foolish and dumb, and they gave up because they're going up against the ACLU, who actually knows what they're doing. But in the long term, we spent, I think, $200,000 or more on that lawsuit, which didn't even go into law. So if we can cancel stuff like that, and we're doing many more other lawsuits, we're going after many more litigation lawsuits in addition to that right now, whether it comes to the Bayview Cross, whether it comes to Bruce Beach, we're paying these attorneys $500 an hour for these frivolous lawsuits due to petty differences that can be solved just through sitting down with one another and coming to a common sense solution. So that's just one example of how we can get rid of waste.
You've talked about Brownsville in particular and how you wanted to improve that area, and I agree that that's kind of an area that sort of gets forgotten, I think, in Pensacola. So it's interesting that you bring it to light, but what are some things that you are wanting to do with that?
The interesting thing about Brownsville is it is divided by the city and county line. So I think T&W Street, if you're familiar with Brownsville, that's where it goes over to the county side when you go into the west. So you have these two different entities with an extreme amount of resources to help a community, not necessarily fighting over how to make this community better, but almost not knowing how, and it's just getting dropped to the wayside. We are making some differences there. The county has just built they remodeled an old church into a community center. That's a great step. We also have other enterprises like Community Health Northwest Florida, which has, thank God they've done this. They've restored an old historic school into a community clinic in Brownsville. So finally we're getting these baby steps of spots, highlighting different spots in Brownsville that hopefully will spread out, but we're still not doing enough. I mean, the best form of affordable housing, which is a huge issue in Pensacola and really any city that's succeeding right now, the best form of affordable housing is infill housing, restoring old houses. It's the cheapest, it's the most effective, and it retains the character of neighborhoods. We do not need to be building these big towers or complexes or prisons, as I call them, which we have throughout the city.
Yeah.
We need to be building these affordable units or remodeling these affordable units in individual neighborhoods, keeping the rents low. We can do that with multiple ways. But the important thing is we need to make the community more safe, more walkable. We need to do that now. We need to find money within the city and county budgets, or maybe even the state budget, to reduce Cervantes Street from a 4-lane highway to a road diet, so to speak, which means reducing the amount of lanes, keeping the volume of traffic. It's proven that if you reduce the amount of lanes on a highway, you can still keep the volume of traffic running through as long as you do it right. Putting in protected bike lanes, that's an important word, is protected bike lanes, not just bike lanes. Sidewalks, trees, landscaping, and I guarantee you when we do that, within the first year, you'll have an influx of private investment along Cervantes Street, which once used to be one of the most thriving corridors in the Pensacola Metro, and now is probably the worst. And it doesn't take a lot of work, it's just baby steps and really just clear vision that I think we need.
Okay, great. That's all I have for you.
Yeah.
So that's it.
Okay.
If you have any questions down the line, feel free to leave a comment. Drew will be happy to answer them for you. And that's it. Thank you so much
Cool.
for meeting with me.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
All right.